Hello, I'm Annette Young and welcome to the 51%er show about women reshaping our world. In this special edition, we're focusing on misogyny, especially among boys and young men. This is the Netflix Adolescence series has gone viral. A harrowing British drama about a young boy accused of killing a female classmate. It's garnered rave reviews for its performances and storyline. Yet its most important legacy could be kick-starting societal change and opening up a much-needed conversation on toxic masculinity. Now, in a moment, I'll be talking to Dr Jackson Katz, a specialist in gender violence and whose book entitled Every Man, How Violence Against Women is a Men's Issue has just been published. But first, Jennifer Ben-Brahim tells us why Adolescence is making waves.
A British family's world falls apart
You're making a big mistake.
as their 13-year-old son is arrested,
Dad, I haven't done anything!
accused of having murdered his female classmate. Netflix's four-part series Adolescence is a fictional tale steeped in reality.
I'm going to start off with asking you.
Do you know a girl called Katie Leonard?
And I've seen an incident on the telly, again, where there was, like, quite a few young boys who stabbed young girls and taken their life. And if I'm really honest with you, it hurt my heart. Do you know what I mean? And it instantly made me think, what's going on with society where this kind of thing's happening?
From a fatal stabbing of 12-year-old Ava White in 2021, to the crossbow killer Kyle Clifford, who searched online for misogynistic podcasts just hours before murdering his ex-girlfriend, as well as the Southport murderer deliberately targeting young girls, leading to some of the worst unrest in the country in over a decade. Adolescence examines the devastating and sometimes fatal consequences of toxic masculinity.
80% of women are attracted to 20% of men. You must trick them because you'll never get them in a normal way.
Statistics show that the number of women killed, injured or threatened by a knife in the UK has more than doubled in a 5-year period, to the alarm of UK MPs.
This violence carried out by young men, influenced by what they see online, is a real problem. It's abhorrent, and we have to tackle it.
A call to action to show adolescence in Parliament and in schools, and a rousing speech by England football manager Sir Gareth Southgate, calling for better male role models. This as more and more boys and young men turn to influencers like the self-proclaimed misogynist Andrew Tate, or social media platforms promoting incel culture.
You look at what the women's movement has done. We have empowered women. We can talk about our emotions. We have very tight-knit communities, but there isn't that kind of cultural information and support for young boys. And so into this void, the only people who step forward are people on the far right and in the manosphere, like Andrew Tate. And ostensibly, what he offers is what young boys want. They want to be told how to be men. Basically down to, you need to become very fit, you need to invest in cryptocurrency, and you need to blame any problems in your life on wokery and women. There was a recent report saying that teenage boys are more likely to have a smartphone than have a father in their houses. And even if you're in a single-parent family, you don't have a father there, we need to make sure our communities have support for boys.
Adolescence launched the week that the UK put into action its Online Safety Act. Platforms like Instagram and TikTok must safeguard against harmful content or face a fine. A survey by the UK's Children's Commissioner found that half of the 13-year-olds surveyed had reported seeing hardcore misogynistic, pornographic material on social media.
Joining me now from Boston is Dr Jackson Katz, a gender violence specialist and author of Every Man, How Violence Against Women is a Men's Issue. Thank you so much for your time, Jackson. As we saw there, the Netflix series Adolescence has caused an incredible buzz, reminding us that toxic masculinity is much more of an issue for young boys as it is for men. Why does this show resonate so much?
I think this is an incredible cultural moment globally because of the power of the storytelling. It's brilliant televisual art, the Adolescence series. But what it does is it really looks at a boy and his family and the influences on boys and young men that come from the online, manosphere. Although it doesn't really foreground the manosphere, it's always there in the backdrop. And it gives us an opportunity to talk about the ways in which misogyny and men's violence against women is being driven by sort of beliefs about manhood that are being shaped in part through the online universe that so many boys and young men inhabit. And it also focuses on, in the storyline, the father, both parents of the boy who murdered this young woman, but the father and his feelings of failure for having failed to protect his son from these influences that he wasn't aware of. So it gives us an opportunity to talk about the role of adult men in the lives of boys, but just more generally, it gives us an opportunity to talk about adult men's responsibility to boys and girls in this cultural moment.
So why have we been so slow to understand the impact of online radicalisation of boys?
Well, it's a very disturbing topic. I mean, I think there's some generational divide because I think a lot of older folks, or, over the age of 45, I mean, just using that as a rough cutoff, who haven't grown up with the technology of communication, the online universe more generally, and obviously the manosphere, which has increased its reach over the last decade or so. It went from the corner of the internet, a dark corner of the internet, to becoming much more mainstream over the past decade, which coincided, not coincidentally, with the rise of Donald Trump and right-wing populism and Andrew Tate's emergence as a global figure. So I think a lot of older folks, and I include myself in this category, have been a little bit more hands-off and thinking, there's some stuff that I don't really like, but they're not really aware of what's happening. And I think partly what has happened as a result of the success of this show, Adolescence, is that some of the parents and older folks who haven't been paying close attention are now paying attention.
And your book is entitled Every Man, and it really is a call to every man. Yet why do so many men constantly fail to understand the need to flip the script when it comes to violence against women and girls? That the onus is on them, not women, to solve the problem?
Well, I think a lot of men are really uneasy and anxious about this subject matter, about feminism, about talking about the gender culture and the changes that have been happening over the past couple of generations. I think there are some men who are happy to have that conversation, who are engaged in that conversation, but I think a lot of men are very nervous. And what they do is, as a result of their anxiety and their lack of fluency with this and had language to use to talk about this subject, they remain silent or they defer to women. And I think they outsource a lot of the conversation about gender and sexuality and relationships, especially with young people, including young men. They outsource that conversation to women, whether it's mothers or other women in the public conversation. And I don't think it's because a lot of men don't care. I just think a lot of men have feelings of inadequacy. They don't know what to say. Honestly, Annette, I see men who are extraordinarily articulate and powerful on so many other issues, and they can speak thoughtfully about so many other issues. But when it comes to issues relating to gender, sexuality, feminist critiques of traditional gender ideologies and gender beliefs and roles, I think a lot of those men become extremely inarticulate, and so they retreat. And the lack of doing that, or the failure to do that, has caused a crisis. And there's so many young men who are adrift today and who are easily manipulated by people like Andrew Tate or political figures like Donald Trump and others who can exploit that feeling of longing and loss and some sort of loneliness epidemic among young men, and for their own political or economic gain.
In your book, Jackson, you also recommend men should stop watching pornography as it legitimises misogynist abuse by normalising sexualised brutality. But is that realistic?
Well, whether it's realistic or not, I think we need to do it, because if we're serious about reducing the global crisis of sexual violence and sexual harassment, we have to address the way in which pornography and the misogyny in pornography normalizes a certain kind of sexual sadism and cruelty. And I'm not saying this isn't anti-sex. It's not anti-sex to critique pornography. So I want to dissociate myself from any notion that it's against sexual freedom or liberation to critique pornography. The misogyny that has been so normalized in porn is a big part of the problem, and I don't think it's going to go away tomorrow, but I do think we have to open up lines of communication and discussion about it, and I do think that adult men need to be part of that conversation. We can't just outsource this one to women.
It goes beyond, doesn't it, regulating social media platforms or banning smartphones under the ages of 16, which we're already starting to see in Australia. I mean, it's about the need for a complete rewiring, if you like, of cultural values, where men understand that their emotional connection is the key to successful relationships with women and not control. So how do you get that message across?
It's a huge wake-up call that while we've been definitely in a positive way advancing women and promoting girls and women's opportunities in a multiracial, multi-ethnic sense, I think we have to pay more attention to bringing men along and bringing young men along into the conversation, into the reading. I think there's a real disconnect between young men, for example, and young women's engagement with feminist ideas, with taking courses at university or reading books or engaging in dialogue about this subject matter. And I think a lot of young men don't even understand that you can be a strong man and be feminist conscious or pro-feminist, that you can support gender equality and support boys and men. I think a lot of young men have a very limited understanding of these issues. And I think that's on those of us who are adults we need to counteract that, because again, the status quo is screaming at us that we're not doing a good enough job.
And the same applies to boys as well, doesn't it?
Of course, but boys take the lead from adults, you know. So I mean, we can't expect boys to be the ones who are the leaders of the change that has to happen. I think adult men are the ones who have to bring up the conversations. We have to initiate dialogue. If those of us who have a platform of influence beyond our role as parents, and I'm a parent of a son, I have a responsibility as a father, yes, but I also have a responsibility as a person who's an educator, who's in public. And I think adult men in positions of influence, cultural influence, religious authority even, but certainly in the media and the sports culture. I mean, there's so many adult men who are good people, but they have not been active and present and meeting the moment when it comes to gender equity and gender violence prevention. And the time is now.
I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much for your time, Jackson.
Thank you very much, Annette. It's been great to be with you.
And that's it for this edition. So until our next show, bye for now.